Hello and welcome back to JoeShaferFlyFishing.com. I'm Joe Shafer. The next fly on my series of Shafer flies is Shafer's Tricky Bug. This fly was developed as a midge initially, but I also really worked on it hard for our tough Trico hatches here on our tailwaters in Colorado. So it crosses over as a Trico fly, very effective pattern. A lot of times I'll fish this in still or in freestones and in tailwaters where there's very large Trico hatches and stuff like that, and fish will seem to find this fly pretty good. So it's another excellent crossover fly that has a dual purpose. I hope you guys enjoyed. Here we'll get started right in on this sucker. It has a couple different materials. First off, our tying thread, we're going to use a black 8/0 tying thread. A lot of times with this fly, I'm tying it from size 20 all the way down to size 26s and even lower. I tie these pretty small a lot of times to mimic those Tricos and small midges. And a lot of times I'll be using a TMC 2487 or a 2488, whichever is your preference on these. I'll typically use the 2488 in the smaller sizes, and then in the little bit bigger sizes I'll use the 2487. I really love the 2487 hook. I use that on quite a few flies, but it's your choice on that. Either one will work. I like the down eye. It's a little bit easier to tie with and things like that. Any good hook sets and with this wider gap as well. Love that hook. Our tying thread's that black 8/0, and we're going to tie that in right behind the head here. Starting out, make a couple wraps, come back over that, little jam knot at the front. Just being careful on this one not to build too much. Because typically you're tying these on smaller sizes, like 20, like I said here, which is what's in the vise here. Just for time purposes, I want to show you a little bit bigger size, but that's what you'll see in this video. But when you get to those smaller sizes, if you build too much, you're going to have a lot of issues towards the end. So next up, we're going to tie in our flash here. And our flash is going back to the thin blue midge, is that sulky hollow shimmer, and that's that same color, 60/30. So we're going to tie in a piece of that to get started here. And I'll show you a little trick here that I use a lot of times to get these finer materials on, is I'll just pull that to the top. So I'll push it behind, catch that thread wrap, pull it behind, and then just cinch that up to where I need it. Right there, looks good. And we'll start tying that back. Just a couple wraps in there. Now we're going to attach a turkey buyout. And you see, I put them floating in water before I tie with them. Reason being is that gets them nice and moist, and there's less chance of them snapping under tension on you. That's a big key with these turkey buyouts, because they're a little bit thinner and not as quite as durable as the goose buyouts, but you can also tie these on way smaller flies. So this little end right here, I always like to cut that back just a little bit. Reason being is that's the most fragile part of that feather. So I just want to come back, cut it down a little bit, and then I'll tie it in here. So as I tie it in, I do connecting wraps all the way back, and I'm just catching that flash as I go with it. All together, you can kind of pull them together if you'd like. That's typically what I'll do, is grab both of them, and I'll come right down to where that barb is on the hook, just off the bend. And then I'll return that thread forward, making sure I'm connecting wrapping and there's no little gaps or anything like that. We want that real smooth in there so that turkey buyout lays down real nice. And I'll return that thread all the way to the hook eye. So now I got a good base to work with here. Now these turkey buyouts are pretty fragile, and you can spin them, especially on these bigger hooks, just by hand. But what I'll typically do is I'll take a pair of hackle pliers, and I'll just attach it, being real careful not to touch the hook point there, and just start spinning that up. And we'll do connecting wraps all the way forward, just spinning that hackle with that hackle plier all the way forward. Being careful not to put too much tension on it. You don't want to snap that off. It's an easy way to use one of your tools if you'd like. And you see that gets real good segmentation there. Those segments really stand up with these turkey buyouts. So now I'm just going to tie that off with a couple turns with my opposite hand. Then I can come in here, clip that off, and then all I have to do is release it, and my hackle pliers clear, ready to go for the next one. Okay, so we got that turned down at the front there. We're ready to go. Now we're going to take our flash, okay, and we're going to come in between those wraps. And what I like to do is just move it around just a little bit, separate those segments a little bit so I don't lay them down. I don't want to lay those segments down. Oh, lost hold of it there for just a second. We'll just back that off, come right out. Wanted to wrap around the hook there. Start that forward again. Lay those wraps of that flash right in between those segments. And if you just move it just ever so slightly, it'll kind of lay itself right in between those wraps. All the way forward. And then we'll tie it off at the top with a couple wraps. Then I'm going to fold that back on itself just like we did in the thin blue midge. Secure it down good so that flash doesn't back out on us. Then we'll just clip the excess. So there's the body of our Shafer's Tricky Bug here. So next thing we're going to do here is get a little piece of razor foam. And this razor foam comes in a little bit bigger sections. But as you see, I trim it down pretty good here. I just want a little piece of foam that's going to stick out the back of the fly there as a little wing bud. White, of course, that's my favorite in this bug, mimicking those beautiful white wings of that Trico or midge. And we're going to wrap over that white foam with connecting wraps just to cover that white foam up just a little bit. And we're going to leave it right like that. Now, the last step of this fly is to put a little bit of black superfine dubbing in there. And our black superfine dubbing is perfect for this application because you can get it real thin and small. I take very, very little of this stuff. You can just touch dub this stuff on very thin. I don't want it too bulky at the front. Bigger freestone rivers with bigger hatches and stuff like that of these Tricos, you could go a little bit bigger on this. But typically I try and keep this pretty thin at the top. And all I'm going to do is come right over those wraps that I made for over that foam. Looks like I need a little bit more. This one got a little bit bigger on me. And I'm going to cover up basically that head. I'll just dub in a little bit more. Then I'll come down to the front and make a couple wraps right there. And I'll finish the fly off with my whip finisher. Come in with the front point. Come around the back edge up towards the top. And then I'm going to secure it with 3 or 4 turns. Build a little head there at the front. And we're going to call that a fly. Shafer's Tricky Bug is complete here. You can see the profile of it, real slim, real sleek. I'm going to come in and finish this fly off by trimming that little bit of razor foam off. And when I trim it off, I just want a little bud there. I don't want a big long piece of white foam hanging out. I just want a little bud showing, and that's it. So, and these extra fibers that are out and things like that you see here, you can pull those off. But again, what I like to do with these is leave those extra hairs and fibers on. Those really add to your fly. They add movement, they add different things to it. I don't typically cut a lot of that stuff off. I just leave it as it goes. And that's one of my favorite little tricks to a lot of my bugs is you'll see those extra fibers hanging off and stuff like that. I don't typically cut them off. But that's your Tricky Bug. See, the under profile is pretty good. You can grease these and run them on top. I typically do it in a tandem fly rig where I'll run a dry up front and then drop this off the back with no weight. Get it in the surface film. It really stands out from the other Tricos. Midge hatches, it's great. Trout with those segmented bodies, really love how that looks. So just a good all-around fly. So I hope you enjoy the Tricky Bug. Spin a bunch up and stay tuned for our next fly in this series. Thank you. Bye.